Welcome back to setting up the Artificer class character that we created in the previous video. As promised, the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at each of these abilities and go through and see if it requires anything that needs to be added to the actual Actions tab before we continue on trying to level this particular character up. So if you recall, we went through and in relation to the Telepathic feature here, modified our charisma to bring it up from the 8 to the 9 that it is now. And that might actually bite us a little bit because reading a little bit more through this detail on this last section here, our spellcasting ability for the spell Detect Thoughts is the ability score we have actually adjusted. So this could be a problem because it's going to require a saving throw. If you look for the spells here and we look for Detect Thoughts, there we go. Just move this off to the side. Let's have a look. Yeah, there's going to be a wisdom saving throw required here. Okay. Might mean that we focus on increasing this ability score over the next couple of ability score improvements that we're going to gain initially, just to improve the strength of this particular spell. But, learning lesson, keep that in mind when you're creating your character. So, we've already made the adjustment. We don't really need to add this particular skill to our Actions tab for the purposes of this second item. You can literally just communicate with any creature who happens to be within 60 feet of you that you can see. No real need to add that to the Actions tab. But we will need to do it for this. And what I'm going to do is a trick I'd used in another video. I'm going to drag this into place first, and I'm going to create a feats tab because that's what this is coming from. And because this character is starting with one, it makes sense that we do that. Or because this is supposed to be tied to our racial traits, we could theoretically do something like this. That makes a little bit more sense so that it tells us which one is a feat we could potentially gain later on in our leveling versus what we started off with. Just in case you forget and it's been a while since you last played your character kind of thing. I am then going to drag this spell into here to see if there's anything that crops up, and there is. So what I'm going to do is set both of these up directly connected to this particular thing here. So we need a saving throw. That means that we need a cast, and we need an effect. So we need an effect to be added here. I'm going to copy over this effect first. So Detect Thoughts is all this is. And really what you're doing here is indicating to the DM that you're concentrating on this particular spell. So that's what it's going to be, and it won't be that, it will be Telepathic. And in brackets, I'm going to do this. Just to tell me where that spell came from, or where this quote-unquote ability came from. Now, does it require the concentration? Okay, so it doesn't say anything about concentration, which leads me to believe you do have to maintain concentration to keep this. All right, you just don't have to worry about using a spell slot or any components. Okay. Now, what happens if you increase in levels? Does it say anything about that? Okay, so I don't know why. If you have spell slots of second level or higher, you can cast this spell with them. I'm not entirely certain why that requirement is there yet, simply because this has no spell slot required. So I'm going to take a few minutes and take a closer look at this once I get this set up. Now the saving throw, that's going to be a little bit different because we're going to be making potentially a couple of saving throws. The first one is going to be their wisdom saving throw. And this is going to be charisma, because that's what we set this up as, which means that they have to simply pass a DC 9 check in order for them to succeed or resist our attempt to detect thoughts. So with that, I'm going to reread this detect thoughts spell, and just see if I can clarify what this portion of this means, and if we need to set anything up for that intelligence check. Right, so I have reread this a couple of times just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. This entire last sentence here doesn't make any sense because there really isn't a spell slot requirement. So I'm thinking this is kind of pointless. In addition to the spell, there is no requirement or gain, if you will, by utilizing a higher level spell slots. So it doesn't make any sense to me. But in relation to the intelligence check here, essentially, the target can make an intelligence check to contest your intelligence check. If they succeed, this spell will end against that particular target. So if you are in the process of interrogating somebody and you are using the Detect Thoughts spell against them, if they pass or make an intelligence check and it wins against your intelligence check, you lose concentration and the spell drops. That's what it comes down to. So you're going to want to keep this spell accessible to you at all times, which is why I put that spell there, or that reference there, so you know what spell it came from. Excuse me. Everything else is now set up and ready to go, so I'm going to remove this particular spell from here, so we don't need to worry too much about that. And that takes care of setting up Telepathic. So Magical Tinkering is one of the few Artificer-specific abilities that exist. And with this particular feature, you have learned to essentially invest, or I wouldn't say invest, but inject a spark of magic into some very innate objects, like a stone or a pebble or piece of bark, something that is very tiny and small. With that, you can choose to add a couple of properties. Sorry, one property at a time per item. And if you try to apply a property to an item that already has a property, the oldest property will go away. So, for example, you can take a small pebble, for instance, and have it start to shed bright light in a radius of 5 feet and dim light for an additional 5 feet. So you can make a very small lighting stone, if you will, that would be good for, well, sneaking around, to be honest, because that light won't be visible very far. You can set up sort of like a messaging stone, if you will, or object, such that if somebody taps that, it will play something that is about approximately 6 seconds long. You could have an object that continuously emits sound, whether it's birds chirping, wolf barking, whatever, it doesn't matter, dog barking, wolf barking, whatever. And it will continue to do that indefinitely. You can also add a visual effect to something that really that's up to you. It could be a picture, text, whatever. And apparently the text requires a maximum limit of 25 words. Once imbued with that property stays. Doesn't go away unless you yourself happen to potentially die. At that point, the objects and the modifiers will eventually fade. I believe that will happen with this one. It's kind of sort of an unknown in the case of this. It doesn't actually state it, but it does state it for something else. So I'm kind of curious if it happens with this one as well. However, you can do multiple objects at once, and the number of objects that you can do is equal to 1, is equal to your intelligence modifier with a minimum of 1 object. So in this case, we could do 5 objects. Not bad if you've got a party of 5. You can set up a small light emitting stone for your entire party. But it doesn't necessarily need to be added to your action slot. But if you're going to be making use of this, in like a dungeon crawl scenario, or setting up a lighting stone rather, so that the whole party can use that to sneak around a house, that kind of thing. I would say it would be useful to have, but not required. So as such, it's probably more than sufficient to just say, hey, DM, I'm going to use this ability. Please just refer to it here, and I'm going to create a stone that sheds light in 5 feet, out to 10 feet max. Okay, fine. Problem solved. You don't necessarily need to make it an actionable item. Now, if you take this as an action, then yeah, you could probably do it. But based on this, it requires a little bit as an action. Okay, so it is something you can do as an action. Okay, well, with that in mind, I would say you would add this to your actions tab. So this would be Artificer. And there's really nothing else to do. There's no limit. You don't have to rest in order to do it again, anything like that. You just literally do it. Now, all you have to do is, I'm using this, and then if the DM asks, you just drag and drop that. Problem solved. So the last feature you gain at level 1 is obviously your spellcasting feature. And because we use the character wizard, we don't really have to go through and do anything, because we already have, all of the spells that we had chosen during that character creation process. But I'd like to point out a couple of things. There is a spellcasting table here to tell you how many spells you're going to know and what the maximum level of spells that you're going to get. How many cantrips you're going to have, as well as the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth level spells and when you gain access to that particular spell slot. So, for example, here, we won't gain access to second level spell slots until we hit 5th level. Whereas we won't gain access to 3rd level spell slots until we hit 9th level. That kind of thing. And it seems to be about every 4 levels past level 1, really is what it is. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is. But you gain a bunch of other stuff when you do this. So you increase your infusions known and infusable items, that kind of thing. So there's a side effect here that comes into play. But we have literally set up everything we have to do for level 1. And now we are ready to take this character past level 1 and continue on to progress through the leveling system. So at level 2, you're going to acquire the Infuse item feature, as well as a number of infusions that you will know, and how many items you can infuse. And I'm not sure if that's how many you can carry or how many items at a time that you can infuse. But we'll take a look at that when we get there. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this level into place. And as we can see that the effects or the additions are now in place, I'm going to pop open the abilities tab here, open this up, and then we will get ready to go and take a look at this. Oh my, this is a little bit on the long side. With the Infuse item feature, you have gained the ability to take your knowledge of Artificer infusions that you're gaining at this particular level and embed them into objects, such as weapons, containers, armor, rings, jewelry, whatever you think it will be appropriate for. However, each of the infusions does limit what the actual item will accept it. So, for example, the Arcane Propulsion Armor requires a suit of armor, whereas the Boots of the Winding Path requires a pair of boots, that kind of thing. So there is a limitation by the infusion. The known infusions column, or infusions known column, tells you how many you actually have knowledge of. And there's one infusion here called Replicate Magic Item that you can take multiple times, but each time you take it, you'll be taking a different item from this list, and you gain access to newer items at higher levels. So Bag of Holding, for example, you can do at level 2. That's kind of handy. But there are a few limitations to this, and I'm kind of confused on one of them. So I would like to see if anyone has a point of clarification that they would like to add to this. So the first thing is that you can infuse a maximum of 2 items after completing a long rest. So essentially you sleep for the night, you can lay out 2 items the next morning and infuse 1 infusion in each of those particular items. Now, here is the confusing part. Your infusion remains in an item indefinitely, but when you die, the infusion vanishes a number of days equal to your intelligence modifier. So in the case of this particular character, after 5 days, the magical property that was embedded in that particular object will vanish. That part's not the confusing part, sorry. This is. You can infuse more than 1 non-magical object at the end of a long rest. The maximum number of objects appears in the infused items column of the Artificer table. That's this column. That means that at the end of the long rest, you can infuse 2 items. You must touch each of the objects, and each of your infusions can only be in 1 object at a time. That kind of leads me to believe, let's say you had taken both the Arcane Propulsion of Armor and Armor of Magical Strength, that you could not create 5 suits of Arcane Propulsion Armor. You would only be able to make 1 suit, as well as 1 suit of Armor of Magical Strength. I do not believe you can make, say, 1 set one day, 1 set another day, and 1 set another day. I don't think that's how that works. So I would like to see if anyone has a point of clarification on that. The other thing is, moreover, no object can bear more than 1 of your infusions at a time. That means you couldn't have a single suit of armor that had both Armor of Magical Strength and Armor of Propulsion Armor. Sorry, Arcane Propulsion Armor added to the same set of armor. That part makes sense. That makes perfect sense. But if you try to exceed your maximum number of infusions, the oldest infusion ends. That leads me to believe that at level 2, you can only do 2 items max. So you can create 2 items, but you're not necessarily the one that has to use them. So if you've got a fighter who is always constantly out in the front lines and always seems to do very well at that particular point, you might want to infuse that particular sword using a weapon-based infusion, say, let's see here, enhanced weapon, and give it a +1 bonus to its attack and damage rolls. That might help out the party. You don't necessarily have to be the person using the equipment, but you can only do 2 at level 2. Later on, you gain the ability to do 3, and then 4, and I think 6 is the max that you can do. So in theory, you can infuse up to a grand total of 6 items. Even though the infusion remains indefinitely until you die, so there really isn't an indefinite value there, because that means you kind of have to live forever. But for the purposes of the campaign that you're running through, you could create a sword very early on in the campaign if you chose the enhanced weapon, give it to your fighter, and they use that the entire campaign, as long as you remained alive. Now, that's the key factor here. Unconscious, you're fine. Dead is when the infusion starts to go away. And that's the point of clarification that I would also like to make. Where is it here? Infusion, where was that? That was up here. When you die. It doesn't say when you're unconscious. It says when you die. Now, the last thing I would like to point out about that is that some of these infusions require you to be a very specific level, and they may have some requirements of their own. So, for example, this particular suit of armor here, you must be at least level 14 to be able to craft it or create it. You also have to have the suit of armor. Whereas this particular suit of armor here doesn't have a level requirement. That means you could theoretically take this at level 2. And there is quite a few items here, or sorry, infusions that you can choose from, but you can only select 4 of them at level 2. Once you've selected those 4, you do get the ability to change them out, but you can do so when you gain a level. So it's not in between levels. Like if you decided that you didn't like what you had or had chosen at level 2, you would have to wait until you got to level 3 before you could actually change them out. You wouldn't be able to do that mid-level. That's not how that works. So you'd have to wait until you gained 3rd level before you actually had the option to swap out the property. The other factor is that if you had already infused an item with that particular property, and you changed it out, the infusion goes away. So it no longer retains that magical property. But this is still a pretty cool and pretty nifty feature. I'm not going to go over all of the various infusions that you can get here. The descriptions are pretty clear, so I don't think I need to go through and read through them. I'll give you a quick example of what they are, though, and that's pretty much all I'm going to provide. Otherwise, this video would probably never finish. Now, the one thing to note is that you have to complete a long rest before you can do this. It's not that you can use it, and then you have to complete a long rest again. It's that you have to have had a good night's sleep, and then first thing after you have completed that rest, you go through and infuse this item. If you don't do it immediately after you've rested, you can't do it until you've rested again. That's how, as a DM, I would interpret that particular ruling. Because, yeah, you've completed a long rest, but if you waited 3 hours before you said, oh, I really should probably infuse this particular item, well, you've been distracted for 3 hours, you don't have the focus you would have had, etc., etc., etc. There's a whole plethora of reasons that I could come up with as to why you can't sit down and infuse that item at that particular point in time. Essentially, this is telling you you must have had a good rest, you must have clarity of mind, much like a meditative state kind of thing, before you can sit down and take the time to infuse it. This isn't something that you can do during combat. This isn't something you can do in the back of a wagon. You literally have to do this immediately after you've woken up. That's the way to read this. Or pretty close to it. You could probably get breakfast first. We'll give you that. And with that, that will actually complete everything that we need to deal with when it comes to level 2, I believe. We don't get any additional spell slots. Okay, so no, we don't gain any known cantrips. We don't gain any known spells. So with that, I'm going to take a moment to export this character so that I can save it for the next videos that I do on the class specializations. But beyond that, we'll continue to go through and level this character up. Level 3 is where you're going to gain your class specialization. And for the purposes of this video, I'm just going to quickly select one, simply because of the fact that I will be doing those class specializations in follow-up videos as I have done in the past. This video is literally detailing all of the features and all the things you have to consider in relation to the Artificer class itself. It is not going to cover any of the actual specializations. So I'm going to drop this into place. Just quickly choose Alchemist and have done that with that for now. So we do gain a new feature called the right tool for the job. So let's have a look at that in a second. We have not increased our infusions known. We have not increased our infused items, but we have increased our known number of first level spells. So what that means is that we need to scroll down here until we get to our spellcasting selection and open up the Artificer spells and minimize that. And I'm just going to quickly drop. Come on. There we go. A first level spell in here. I'm not even going to worry about selecting it too much. Spells are personal, which is why I don't necessarily state you should probably take this spell because of this reason. That's not how I work when it comes to these videos. These spells are generally personal to the person who's going to be playing that particular character, and everybody has a different catalog of spells they prefer. So I'm just going to quickly drop that one into place. Minimize it so it's out of the way, because really I'm trying to focus on going over the features. So let's go back up here. Okay, let's take a look at this feature. So the right tool for the job feature is giving you the ability to create a set of tools specific to an artisan's set of tools that you need at the time that you need them, although it does take an hour of uninterrupted work for you to prepare them. They will appear within 5 feet of you, and you will require a short or a long rest in order to really do this. So essentially, you have to know in advance what you're going to need, create them while you're resting, either through a short or a long rest, and then go through and actually make use of the tools. If the next day you realize you need an entirely different set of tools and you use this feature again, you lose the previous set. They just go away. You're essentially reutilizing that material to create a brand new set of tools, is what it comes down to. Now, even though these are the product of a magical feature, quote unquote, the tools themselves are non-magical. They will vanish when you use this feature again. What that tells me is that you're going to be working with a very specific property of materials. When you're done, you've got a set of tools you can utilize. If you use this feature again to create an entirely different set of tools that you need, the first set you created just simply reform back and remold into what the original set of material looked like. It's a way to look at it. It's probably not exactly how it is. It kind of sounds like you're pulling something out of thin air, but I like to think that there's a little bit of a component requirement involved. With Thieves' tools or Artisan's tools in hand. So you actually do need tools in hand, and I suspect it actually converts your existing set of tools into the tool you need. And then it reverts back to your Artisan tool or reverts back to your Thieves' tool when you recast it. Doesn't really require a need to be added to the Actions tab here. You are making use of your rest period in order to create these tools, kind of like what you were doing with your other infusion skill set, which also didn't really need to be added here. So I don't think this is something that is required to be added to the Actions tab. Now with that, we have completed everything we need to deal with for level 3, so I'm going to focus on level 4. Now level 4 is the ever-present ability score improvement that everyone has probably sick and tired of me running through. But for those of you who have not yet watched any of my videos, this is where I'd like to go through and describe the limitations of what this actually does. So let me drop the level into place first, and then I will go over this once I just do a quick check to see if we have any increase in our spells. So no and no. All right. With the ability score improvement, there are 2 guaranteed options that you have available to you, and possibly a third depending on the rules your Dungeon Master has set out. The 2 guaranteed options are as follows. The first, you can take one of these ability scores here and increase it by 2 points. So for instance, I could take this Charisma skill and add 2 points to it, bringing it up to 11 from the 9. The second guaranteed option is that I can take 2 ability score points and adjust each one by 1. So I could take this strength to a 12 and my dexterity to a 16, for example. The third option is only going to be available to you if and only if the Dungeon Master is permitting feats within their campaign. Now, in this particular character's case, it was a custom lineage, so we were guaranteed that feat. There is nothing the DM can do around that outside of your character no longer qualifying for a feat. But the other feats that exist, and some of which were now introduced by Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, has grown. But these are all the available feats that you can choose from, and they are available from this feats button. And this would be a time that you could choose one. You can only take one. At a time, I should say. So you could forgo the ability score improvements completely and do nothing but select feats each time you gain an ability score improvement, provided your Dungeon Master allows that. And that is the key. The feats selection option is optional. It is not a requirement by the Dungeon Master to allow it. So that is something you must keep in mind. Now, in this particular case, I'm simply going to take that charisma. Actually, you know what? I'm going to modify my constitution because that's going to highlight another issue here. So I'm going to take my constitution and increase it by 2 points. Sorry, that was, I believe 11, so that should be 13. Now, the reason why I've highlighted that is because of this change here. I went from an 11, which had a modifier of +0, to a 13, which has a modifier of +1. What does that mean, you might think? Well, what it means is this character's missing hit points. And the reason they're missing hit points is that I've had a Constitution point modifier change I've also leveled up 4 levels. I am missing 4 hit points. How do I know that? Plus 1 times 4 is 4. If somehow you manage to increase this by 2 points, which, by the way, I don't even think it's possible, then it would be 2 times 4 would give you 8. But because we've only made an adjustment of 1 point here, it's literally 1 times 4 is bringing this up to 4 additional points for 27. Now, if I was 8th level, I could add 8 hit points. If I was 12th level, I could add 12 hit points. And that's because of that multiplication between the level that you're at and the modifier that you have gained. And this applies after you have added the level, because that's when you're actually gaining the ability score improvement. So that's how that works in this particular case. Now, the good news here is I've managed to complete 2 tasks in one part in this video. I don't have to spread that part out. Nice. But that does complete everything that we need to do for level 4. So in relation to level 5, we are gaining an additional Artificer Specialist feature, which means that we are gaining a class specialization feature. We are gaining a proficiency bonus increase. We are not having a gain in any of our fusion items. But we are also gaining a 2nd level spell slot. So in the case of this particular video, I will be applying a 2nd level spell slot. So I'm going to gain that, go back to my Actions tab here. It's interesting that I'm getting 3rd level spell slots already. Thinking there might be a bug with this calculation happening on right now, because according to the table, I should only have 4. Actually, this isn't even the spell slots. This is spells known. Do they have any information on when you actually gain spell slots? Let me have a quick look at that. Nope, there is definitely a bug here, because even in this example here, if you are a 5th level Artificer, which I am, you have 4 1st level and 2 2nd level spell slots. Well, I appear to have 4 1st level, so that part's right, but I seem to have 3 2nd level and 2 3rd levels. I shouldn't even have 3rd level spell slots just yet. So, preparation, that should be 0, and that should be 2. So let's see if that makes any adjustments to it. Now, it's a bug with the character leveling up, so you might have to periodically adjust your total spell slots. And all you have to do is just make sure that you match your total number of spell slots here. Now, this table probably also refers to how many spells you know, simply because of how it's wording, but it also seems to line up with the total number of spell slots you have. Not sure why that's the case, but whatever. Maybe there's a bit of clarification that can occur with this in relation to Fantasy Grounds. So, I am now going to choose a 2nd level spell. So let me go down here, open up the spellcasting ability. Come on. Oh, I already have it open. Duh. I wonder if the Alchemist... No, it doesn't look like it adjusts any additional spells, so I'm not going to worry about that. Okay, so I'm going to select my first 2nd level spell and drop it into place. I am on the Actions tab. And it does look like preparation is required for these spells, just so that you are aware. Ta-da, okay. Now, I'm going to check to see how many you can prepare before I assume that. Ooh, pyrotechnics looks fun. Skywrite? Really? You can write words? You can write words in the clouds. Okay. Go with levitate. Again, the spells themselves aren't necessarily important for this. Let's see. How many can you actually prepare? Okay. So to prepare spells, it is equal to your intelligence modifier plus half of your artificer level rounding down, which means at level 5, I can prepare a total of 7 spells. So I've already got 4 there, 5, 6, 7, which means I'd only be able to prepare one of my second level spells if I decided to prepare all of my first level spells. And just to showcase that, that's what I will do. So that is the limitation that this character falls under. Now, there's a good chance this character is not getting anything that will increase his or her intelligence past level or total of 20 here, unless I get a magical item of some kind or I infuse an item that grants me that ability that increases this up to a +6 bonus. Then I'd be able to prepare that last spell. But for now, I am unable to do so. Once I hit level 6, I will be able to do so. Now, in relation to the proficiency bonus increase, there's nothing we really have to do. All of the stats that we have that have this highlighted star here, so in this case our constitution and our intelligence, all benefit from the proficiency gain that we have already acquired, and it's automatically done. And the same thing happens with our skills. So our arcana, history, investigation, perception skills here all have the proficiency bonus automatically applied to them. Nothing else is going to actually gain that unless we gain quote-unquote proficiency in that particular skill. So if at some point I took a feat that gave me the ability to choose another skill here, or 3 or 4, I could then highlight those or enable those to be proficient or double proficient and gain the proficiency modifier there. That's how that proficiency bonus works. But in this case, we don't have to do anything at level 5. There's no changes we need to make. The other thing that will benefit from that are your attack actions. So you'll see here that we're getting a +3. Well, we're probably not getting a +3 because of strength or dexterity. Yeah, our strength is configured in this particular case. This is our proficiency bonus. So as a result, we are gaining a little bit here. And you'll see that this is a +5 because ranged weapons, which by the way we have an armor of 20 crossbows there, or bolts, ranged weapons use dexterity, melee weapons use strength, unless they have the finesse property and your character / class / race allows you to make use of your dexterity as your bonus. So that's where the proficiency bonuses come into play. And that completes everything we need to do for level 5. At level 6, we are gaining our first increase in our known infusions, as well as how many items we can infuse at one point in time. We are gaining a new feature called Tool Expertise. And while we are not gaining any new spell slots at level 6, we are gaining the ability to prepare that last spell that we couldn't prepare before, because we can now prepare a total of 8 spells, half our level, plus our intelligence modifier. So I'm going to quickly drop this into place. So I've already taken care of the preparation of the spell. Don't need to worry about that. But let's take a look at the skill we're gaining, which I believe was Tool Proficiency. No, Tool Expertise. Well, let's see what this particular feature gives us. So with Tool Expertise, you are now gaining double your proficiency bonus for any ability check you make that uses proficiency with a particular tool. So for example, something like Sleight of Hand, for instance, would give you double proficiency if you're using Thieves' Tools to pick a lock. So another option could be, let's see, investigation or anything like that. But how would you do that? Well, there is an easy way that you can go about doing this. It is going to be something that you can take advantage of from an ability score here. So we want to add it to our Actions tab. And then what we want to do is group this. And this is going to be granted by our Artificer abilities. And it's called Tools Expertise or Tool Expertise. We want to create a new effect and give it a name. And this will be Tool Expertise, semicolon. It will be for a check, colon, and we want to go to PRF. Oops, that should be a 2, not a 1. Now, I'm putting square brackets around the 2 PRF. It will be on you and on you alone, and it will be on next roll. Now what will happen is if you're inside of a situation where you can apply this effect to yourself, so I'm going to do this inside of the combat tracker so that you can see the effect actually being added, as you can see here, you'll see that it will actually calculate out double your proficiency score. So if you recall, your proficiency score here is 3. That means that this is calculating things properly. Now, if I go back and say execute a sleight of hand check, it should automatically add the proficiency bonus and remove the actual roll here. Now, here's the problem. If you are already proficient in something, you don't want to do it that way. What you'll probably want to do is temporarily, let's say investigation had the ability to use a tool. You'd want to temporarily give yourself double proficiency before you actually make the roll, and then return it back to its normal proficient state. That way you don't sort of futz around here, because if I were to add that effect and then roll something here that already has the proficiency bonus added to it, I don't think plus 14 is correct. It should have been 11. So it's going to double the double, or it's going to add an additional doubled proficiency on top of the 3 you're already gaining for that particular skill. So we don't really want that to happen. So you got to be cognizant and careful when you actually go through and do this. You could potentially just simply go, all right, I need sleight of hand. I'm going to be doing something that's double proficient. You roll it, and away you go. And you'll see that the double proficiency bonus there equals the bonus that we had when we initially used the effect. It's entirely up to you as to how you want to do it. Both ways are fairly convenient, and I wasn't proficient in that to start off with. But it gives you options that you can make use of, and that's one of the things I love about Fantasy Grounds. Now, based on the fact that this particular video is already roughly 40 some odd minutes into my recording, I'm going to pause this here, create this as a part 1 to the leveling of this particular class, and continue on in the next level. I may even have to break this into a third level, or a third video rather, based on how complicated some of the later features are when it comes to explanations and configuring and setting them up for your character. But we'll see. We've made it to level 6 within the 40 minutes, but there's been a lot of information that we've imparted through the video. So I may just go from level 7 through to level 14, for example, and then have a third video that closes off the last 6 levels. We'll see. With that, however, I hope you have found this video quite informative, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.